I get to talk all about painting your own story. And so this is something that's so important to me because for me personally, I wasn't even able to paint my own story for the longest time, or I wasn't able to dream or decide what do I want my life to look like. Everything was kind of running on autopilot. And I'd love to hear in the chat if this resonates with you, because I know a lot of people I talk to feel the same. They've been running their life on autopilot, or they don't have time, or they don't have money, or they don't have the resources to start making the decisions on their own. And I think it was such a theme throughout today on really turning the lens inward to see how that can change, because it is possible. Not one of the speakers said you can be limitless unless. There is no limit to who it can be, but you do have to be willing to do some work. And like all of them said, it's all about those blocks and those things that are coming up in our life that we have to address. And I think one of the very interesting ways to start doing that is listening to yourself. A lot of times we're saying things, but we're not actually hearing what we're saying or how we're saying it. And that's affecting everything we do. Just a little example of something that I had done, it was probably a month or two ago now. Whenever I went to do something, I said, oh, I have to go do laundry. I have to go write the emails. Oh, I have to quickly go grab the kids. None of that was untrue. But once I started listening to myself, I was saying, I have to. And have to's feel like a heavy energy. They feel like a burden, and they feel like an obligation. And nobody wants to do obligations. If you love obligations, like, let me know. I'd love to be steered straight on that one. So what I started doing is getting aware of what I was saying. And so I started switching to I get to fold the laundry. I get to go write those emails. I get to go pick up the kids. And I get to has this feeling of excitement. Even when I say it and not trying to change my voice, it automatically changes. So I get to is like that exciting, like kid, like, ooh, getting to go to the candy shop kind of a feeling, rather than that I have to, which just automatically just, and it feels heavy. And so when we're talking about painting our life and painting our story, that's when we really get to choose what we're bringing into it. So there's a couple ways we get to paint our story. And we have to be really mindful how we do it, so our life ends up like a masterpiece instead of a finger painting. Because I'm sure there's different times in your life where you feel like your life is a finger painting and barely holding on, and there's that piece glued in here, just hanging off here, and this little thing here. I'm sure for those who have kids, they can think of a picture in their mind very, very easily of all their children's handcrafts. So one of the things we get to be very mindful of, the first thing is all the things that are affecting our paintings, and so affecting our masterpiece. And so the first person who gets to paint ourselves, paint our stories, paint our lives is us. We have a paintbrush and we get to create what it looks like, what we look like, how we're formed, how we show up in the world. We get to choose that, and every decision we make is a brushstroke. So that's a brushstroke creating your most authentic self. And that brushstroke is coming from the most real place. And that's the brushstroke you want to listen to. And if we get really quietly, we can listen to our heart rather than our ego, right? It's very important. I won't get into that today because that's a very big, deep talk and deep dive into energy, and I believe how it affects everything, but we're going to focus on what your role is. And so when we make decisions like, I I'm shy. That is your paint stroke. That is a makeup of your personality. That is a makeup of your authentic self. I like tacos. I don't like the sound of loud chewing. It makes up your likes, your dislikes, your pet peeves, your passions, your true selves. And you want to be in the driving seat of that. You want to be the artist and the main artist in your story. Now, oftentimes, what we do without realizing it is we hand that paintbrush off, or we give a paintbrush to someone else at the same time. And so that's when we're letting other people have an opinion on what we believe and how our life turns out. And so when we hand over that brush, we have to be so cautious, because what ends up happening is we start taking on other people's beliefs. And the crazy thing is, other people's beliefs are only their beliefs because of their life experiences. So that does not mean that it is true. That does not mean what they are saying is factual. And it does not mean that it's true for you. Even if it's factual, it does not mean it's true for you. So we've all done it. We've handed paintbrushes out to everyone in our lives, and we've let them direct where we're going. And by doing that, we're not only stuck by our limits, but we're stuck by the limits of everybody we handed that paintbrush to. And so this analogy has really taken on a life of its own. I think that's hilarious. So what we need to do is start making the conscious choices of getting those brushes back. Sarah's there. She gets it. She is a step ahead. So we get to start taking those brushes back. And the only way we can do it is start getting very conscious of it. And so by doing that, we need to ask, like, if something comes into your life that, like, I don't like seafood. Say that's a simple one. I don't like seafood. Now the question is, have you ever tasted seafood? And a lot of times, like, this is just an example, a lot of times they're like, well, no. And then you ask, well, why don't you like seafood? And a lot of times it comes up, well, my mom didn't like seafood, and so I just know it's gross because she doesn't like it. And so that was a very simple example of how they've made a decision for you. So you didn't even get to experience that part in your life. And no judgment. I'm not a fan of seafood. Just an example. But that's where we get to start taking those paintbrushes back. And as the other speakers have said previously, we need to do it in a non-judgmental way. Because even though those people are adding paint strokes to your masterpiece and forming the way that they think you should look, they're not doing it in a hateful way or anything like that. And so we need to look at it as from non-judgmental. And we need to take ownership. We handed out those brushes and we made the choice of letting them have a say in what our masterpiece turns out like. So I think that's very important and a very, very hard pill to swallow, because it's something I try to teach my children. If they get in trouble, the options are, okay, do you want this like punishment or bad thing or whatever, or do you want to choose to do the right thing? But the thing is, once they decide to fool around when they should have went to bed or whatever it may be, they get to know that they knew what could have happened, and this is what happens from their choices. So their choice was not taken away from them when they have to, whatever the punishment was for the deed. It wasn't taken away. They still made that choice. It just might not be one that we like or want to live with. And so we have to realize that when we're making these decisions here, even though it's something we don't want to live with, that was our choice too. Because by saying that, oh, this happened to me and everything like that, we're giving our power away. And so we need to get out of that victim mentality. And I just feel that, shake it off. Like, let's shake off that victim mentality and start being like, I made this choice. it was a sucky choice. I don't like how it's played out in my life. I don't like how I am living in this place. What am I going to do to change it? And it's very important to make that transition from this is so sucky to what choice am I making moving forward to change it? Because a lot of times it's so easy to get stuck in that mindset of this is sucky. This sucks. This is awful. But because we're looking at it from judgment and we're judging ourselves for getting us in this situation, it's very hard to get into the next stage of things where we can now say, okay, what are we doing here on out? And that's when we start getting to be limitless, when we start looking at that limitations and we start choosing otherwise. I just want to take a second because it feels so good in this space. It feels so good. All of a sudden, it's like a lid gets taken off and our eyes get open. And it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how many paintbrushes I had handed out. I didn't realize how much power I had given up and played the role of this is happening to me. It's a horrible place to live in. And by living in that space, you have lower energy. Of course, you can't get things done. You're exhausted. You're a victim. Things are happening to you. So let's get out of that. Let's now get into the path of, okay, thank you for my paintbrush. Now I'm going to use this to create my masterpiece. I am going to do a little bit of editing. I'm going to get rid of stuff that is no longer adding to the beauty of what my life is becoming. And you get to make choices. And when you are handing out the paintbrushes, it's not always going to be good choices. It's not always going to be right choices. But we don't always know that until we start making them. And so that is where it's unbelievably important to just start making the step. Don't wait until you are ready to make the step. Don't wait until you have all the pieces in line, and don't wait until things are perfect, because that's going to be the biggest thing that holds you back. That's when things start coming up, such as procrastination, or such as working so hard and doing all the things. Multitasking and procrastination are the same thing. They are both doing the same thing in your life. They're holding you back and keeping you in a stage of slowing down and not getting the things done. So that's why we need to be super intentional and super intentional on what we're creating and if we're creating our life. So I'd love to hear in the chat, have you been actively creating your masterpiece? Or do you have maybe a few too many paintbrushes out there? Because I think it can be, it affects everybody. So it's just to get to that mindset. And this is what changes people from just like going through the motions to actually being driven, being that trailblazer, and start really making those choices and start creating that life. I love this. Sophie, masterpiece in progress. Oh, and multitasking and procrastinating. And you know what? You say you do both, and we all do in one stage or another, but now it's time to get aware of it, and getting aware of it without the judgment, right? Because once we put that judgment, we've all of a sudden made ourselves wrong. We've made ourselves feel bad about it. We've shamed ourselves about it. And shame is the lowest energy form and the lowest feeling you can make yourself feel. Would you shame your child? And this goes back to Kristen, what Kristen was saying earlier. Would you shame your child for feeling that way? Would you shame them for making a wrong choice? You wouldn't. Honestly, we need to cheer ourselves on for choosing to make choice or deciding to make choices and trying something different. It's not always going to work, but we got to put it out there. I I am loving all the conversations. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about painting your story. I strongly recommend getting quiet with yourself and deciding what you want your painting, what you want your masterpiece to look like. That'll help you with your direction, and that'll really help you moving forward. Sarah talks about doing the big goals. It's good to have that big vision. And then you get to break down into small pieces, right? Little things, doable things. And that's each paint stroke. That's each stroke of your masterpiece. And you just do little ones, and each time you add to it, you're getting that much closer to creating the masterpiece you want. So I want to invite each of you to start taking those paintbrushes back. I want to open it up to a bit of a question and answer period. This has been a lot. This has been a lot of information, because it's not only the things that I'm saying, but it's the thoughts that you guys have going on in the background, like, oh, I was doing it here, or I didn't realize I was doing it here. I'd love to hear, what are some questions you have, or where have your paintbrushes been? Who have you let have control of your paintbrushes? I know I had talked in a previous conversation about being from a trades family. And that was a big one for me for a very long time. I was letting my parents, my family, through no intention, they did not directly say it or anything like that. I decided that that's how I let them paint my masterpiece. So things changed. I mean, I'm here today. Once I took that paintbrush back, I was able to actually make decisions from what was good for me and my authentic self. Oh, we have Sarah. How do you handle the people in our lives that want to paint our masterpieces? I love that question, because it's really hard. Like, we don't know when they're going to decide to put opinions on you and try to mold your life. But that's the point where we get to decide. It's not going to stop people from giving their opinions, because they're going to do it no matter what. And you can't control anything that they are saying. You can't stop that. You can't filter it. So wouldn't it be nice if we just like filtered some people and like, no, nope, sorry, you don't get talking permission in my life. It's not how it happens. So what ends up happening is, when that comment comes, you get to ask, is that true for me? If it's not true for you, you can send it back with love. Thank you. Thank you for your concern. I really appreciate it. You can even say, I'll think about it. If that's what that person needs to hear, you can even just give a courtesy, yeah, I'll think about it, and send it back. Because once they leave, the graffiti that they put on your masterpiece no longer affects them. That graffiti they put on your masterpiece, it's you who has to be out there with the soap, scrubbing it off for how long. And sometimes the damage can take such a long, long time. And we don't want to, I know sometimes people say things and you're like, oh my gosh, and you just want to like get upset or get mad or something like that. That's where sending it back with love, because that's not doing anything. It's not creating anything better in your masterpiece or in your life. And it's really important to send it back in love, because why not make it better? Why not leave your environment better than what it started? You never know. That might just be the domino effect the person needs to start taking control of their masterpiece. It might not. Some people are just out there to graffiti. That's them. That doesn't have to affect you. That doesn't have to be playing on your everyday psyche. You just don't have time for that. I am loving all the feedback. Today is one of those days where I decided to pick up the paintbrush and create something. This is my first ever time doing a live event. And so it was going to be a little messy, My paint strokes today were a little messy, but that's okay. But because that's creating the bigger thing. Next time it'll be a little smoother. Next time it's going to be a little bit more polished. And that's just what it looks like. But it's great when we can have a positive impact on others. It's incredible. Oh, Rachel, I give my paintbrushes to my children and partner daily. It's messy and chaotic. And they're making decisions from what they know. So do you want your children, depending on what their age is, my oldest is 5 years old, so I wouldn't let my child, my 5-year-old, make the decisions for me or for our household, right? And most of all, for how my life is created. If my life was created from a 5-year-old, I would have sparkle makeup all over my face like my 3-year-old did yesterday. And which that can be fun on your every once in a while, but you don't want that chaotic energy running your household or running your life. So you get to take that power back. And as you slowly start doing it, it starts reflecting in everything. We can't change what other people are doing or how they're acting. We can decide how we react to it. So I really love that comment. Let's see. We were raised with these ideas that others are allowed to speak into our lives instead of who God made you to be and how to go forward in that. This new thought process is fantastic. I totally agree. It's been for so long we needed to be silent and not heard. And now we're getting into such an age of really embracing who we truly are. Sophie has an entire leg of drawings today. Yeah, and I really love this comment. I cannot make decisions for my grown children. Therefore, no one should be allowed to make decisions for me. And they can be coming from the most place of love, but they can't know everything that's happening. They can't know your dreams, your aspirations, where you're going, your love languages, how you work with energy of those around you. They can't know that. So if they're making the decisions and being in the driver's seat, and that's like such a good point, we also need to look at where are we trying to make decisions for other people? Where are we trying to paint other people's masterpieces? We need to take ownership for that just as much as take ownership for those who we are letting paint on ours. I think that's such a good point. And that's where, like I said, that's where the idea of this event started. Is I was creating my group coaching program, Ignite, and I realized one of the biggest things that we need to tackle first before anything else is our limits, and getting these limits gone or being aware of them. And so we know where we are choosing to do this.